What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down why tomorrow is going to be a very important day as we have CPI data coming out and what other pieces of data are suggesting about CPI. I'm also going to break down what the news is saying about Tesla and how things are looking from the technicals right now. But before I bring in the devil's information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. If you put in $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks, and the offer ends very, very soon. Anyways, now let's break down what's going on with the markets. Right now, when it comes to technicals, just based off technicals alone, SPY looks bullish. Apple's looking bullish, so is the QQQ. Nvidia is holding up nicely, but Tesla's looking relatively weak. Tesla ended up closing below the daily 200 EMA, which is not the best of signs. Now, whether or not this continues, though, will depend on many different factors, and the whole market will be just as impacted by CPI as it is to like other factors out there from technicals and etc. So I want to focus a lot on CPI, break down why CPI is going to be very important and what the data suggests for it before I end up breaking down these charts. So first and foremost, CPI comes out 1 hour before the market opens. This is going to be very important at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. For CPI, we're expecting this to be between 3.2 and 3.1% for all items. The last time it came out, it was at 3.1%. So we're expecting either the same CPI, if not a slight increase in CPI, for all items. And then for core CPI, we're expecting this to be between 3.8 and 3.9%. The last time this came out, this was at 4%. So we're expecting this to be a little bit lower than what we saw previously. Now, CPI is very manipulated, so I can't always make promises about it, but the data I have suggests something that's not as bad for it. So looking at the chart, this chart right here shows you this purple line here. This is actually core CPI. The blue line is all items CPI. For core CPI, aka CPI without food and energy, we're expecting this to drop just a tiny bit by 0.1 or 0.2%. And then for all items CPI, we're expecting a slight increase, if not the same number. So either it's the same or it's a little bit higher by about 0.1%. Now, looking at the data, there's a very good chance it's going to be very close to the previous report because I have some data that's kind of positive for it. Looking at this, you could see, and this actually relates to the data from before because before it was energy that played a role in holding it up the way it was. But this time around, the data is showing a slight decrease in energy because in November, the average gas price was around $3.44, and this dropped down to $3.26 on average in the USA for retail gasoline prices. That's for all formulations on average. So a slight decrease in gas happened. Then on top of this, we have even more data. This data just shows you that oil prices tend to be very correlated with CPI or also the US inflation rate historically. So you can see the connection between them right here. This relates to this data right here. This is actually CPI versus crude futures, which is heavily dictated by oil prices. And notice how in the past, historically, oil prices, aka crude futures, and CPI, they went up together, they came down together, they were sideways together here, came down a bit, up, down, right? They're very, very similar. And what's good about this is we have the data already for crude, and we don't have the data for CPI yet for December. That's why I want to show you guys something interesting. So in October, let's go back to October of this year, CPI was at 3.2, basically. 3.2 was CPI. Crude was at 86. Then we go to November, CPI was at 3.12, a slight decrease. Crude was at 77. For December, crude went down to 72. We saw crude actually drop. CPI's data is going to be coming out for tomorrow for December. So we'll be watching to see if CPI follows the trend. But basically, with oil prices dropping, there's a very good chance CPI is going to be very close to the previous report because oil plays a very big role in how other prices are impacted when it comes to commodities and also like travel, transportation, the list goes on. So oil is very important, and it is suggesting that we're going to get a moderate CPI, a decent one, if anything. Now, whatever CPI gives us, it's going to have a big effect on the Fed. Right now, the Fed is currently expecting a 0.25% cut in the Fed funds futures rates. We're also going to be looking to see if that ends up being the case tomorrow because this could change depending on CPI. That's why it's very important. It affects the Fed's policies. The market's very greedy right now, so we'll see if it remains greedy tomorrow. We'll see if these indicators change, so I'll be paying very close attention to them. So as a reminder, and I want to clarify this, okay? For core CPI, we're expecting a slight decrease. There's a very good chance that's going to happen. It's going to be close to expectations, in my opinion, based off the data I saw. And we also have initial jobless claims. Not going to focus too much on this. It's not going to matter as much. CPI is much more impactful. Then we have CPI year over year. This is supposed to be between 3.1 and 3.2%, which sounds very reasonable, as the previous report was 3.1%. In my opinion, it's going to be very close to 3.1%. I have some data that suggests that. Could it be 3.2%? It's a possibility, but I think it'll be very close to that level, whether it's off by like 0.1% points. So we'll see. Most likely, it's going to be a decent CPI from what I'm seeing. It shouldn't be that bad when it comes to the increase. So we'll wait and see how it goes. As far as Tesla goes, there's some news that came out. I already talked about this in some detail. Tesla has released an updated Model 3 for North American buyers, which is great news. This first came out in China. Now it's coming out over here in the US. This is a big, big, big improvement as we have Project Highland coming out. This is going to help them cut production costs and very, very much just increase the appeal of the sedan by improving its exterior, its powertrain, and interior components. With this revamp coming out, it's going to look very cool. You can see a picture of it right here with the new headlights. Looks very, very beautiful. I actually love the new design. I actually like it a lot more than the old one. And if anything, they're going to be trying to optimize its aerodynamics. They're going to do a lot of things to it, improve the wheels, and the new colors are going to be coming out. So very, very cool stuff for the new Tesla model. Very, very awesome. Nice little revamp right over here. I can't wait to see what it looks like once it starts coming out. And it'll be out very, very soon. I believe later on during this month, if not by next month from what I saw. So very, very good news. Uh, this is coming out very, very soon. That is going to be very, very awesome. And once this all comes out here in the US, it'll be very, very cool. So, once again, very, very soon, we'll be seeing these on the streets. Very, very awesome revamp. Very, very cool. The volume on Tesla is about 91 million. Not that bad, kind of like flat right now. But there is one thing that concerns me a little bit. The price per ratio is dropping. Tesla is losing a lot of strength, not as strong as before. When it comes to the seasonality basis, I just want to mention that at 12 o'clock p.m., we tend to see volatility. At 2 and 3 p.m., we also see more volatility. Thursdays, they tend to be green only about like 48% of the time. It's kind of a weekday historically, but that doesn't matter as CPI matters so much more. So now let's break down these charts. Without further ado, let's break down what I think is going to play out for Tesla. So honestly, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm very well aware of my lack of knowledge about what's going to happen with CPI because it's a very manipulated number. And if I were to tell you with 100% certainty, I would be lying. I don't know what CPI is going to be. So the best thing I could do is kind of go over the possibilities and then the probabilities of how it's going to pan out. So if CPI is hot tomorrow, if CPI is at 3.3% or something like that, we're going to see Tesla sell off. We might see Tesla hit 232, if not 230, and start to sell off. If we lose 230, 228 is going to be coming. Make sure you pay very close attention to the daily 200 EMA. Tesla's been trading around this. That's currently at 234. We're just barely below that, so that's going to be very important. If we get a decent CPI, let's just say Tesla tries to follow the markets. If the market bounces off CPI and Tesla follows the trend, see if we could try to break above 236. If we break and hold above this, our next target is 238. Then we have 240, 242, and the list goes on. I'm not going to be worried too much about 242 yet. I would just say let's just try to get above 238 for now if we get a good move. There's a very good chance CPI will be decent. So if the market does push up higher, we're going to be watching to see if Tesla could try to at least break above 234 at the 200 EMA on the daily. And let's see if Tesla could try to hold these levels. If it manages to achieve that, it's going to be in a good place. Let's see if Tesla could do it. And it all depends on CPI for now. I want to call out something else that's very important. And I just want to note, guys, Tesla's relatively weak. I forgot to mention this. Tesla is currently relatively weak, not looking the strongest from a technical standpoint. The market's been pushing and Tesla's still remained weak. So technically, from a technicals, Tesla's a little bit weak. But there is a possibility of it trying to bounce depending on CPI. So we'll just have to wait and see. Just be very, very careful with it, and we'll see what CPI brings for it, especially for the markets. Anyways, about the VIX, I just want to mention that this is going to be very important as well. I did mention this briefly. We have this slight uptrend on the VIX. We're going to be watching to see if the VIX bounces off this blue trend line of support. Do we get this bounce right here, or do we end up losing the support depending on the VIX? The VIX shows us that when CPI comes out, it might get a bounce off the blue trend line, causing the market to sell off. If the market sells off, the VIX might launch off this trend line. But if the market gets one more push to the upside, we might see the VIX lose the blue trend line, come back down to this 11.9-ish area, depending on the level and the bounce and such, and then bounce after that. So it all depends on CPI. Either the market's going to get another rally to the upside before forming a top and then reversing, or the market's about to get a rug pull tomorrow. It all depends on CPI, of course. So be on the lookout for that. SPY, and I just want to call this out very, very bluntly. From a technical standpoint on the daily, SPY looks bullish. It looks very bullish. We have 4 decent days in a row. We're also fighting around 477.5. Excuse me. This looks bullish. Very, very bullish. If CPI is decent, SPY is going to break out to 478 or so. And if that breaks, 480 is coming. If CPI is hot at the levels I mentioned earlier, we could see SPY get a rug pull back down to 474. If that fails, this 470 is coming. So we will see if we get a rug pull or not. We're at resistance on SPY, but the technicals do look a bit more bullish. They favor the bulls a bit more. Let's see if we either break 478 or if we lose 474. CPI is going to determine that very, very quickly. On the QQQ, if we're bullish, we want to see this thing break above 410. If it breaks that, we could be approaching the high that we made. The all-time highs could be coming. If we fail, so that's going to be around 412 to 413. If we get a hot CPI, we're going to be coming back down to 406 and eventually 404. The technicals look bullish on the QQQ just like that of SPY. We look like we favor the bulls a bit more just based off technicals alone. So we will see if CPI helps this eventually try to push up to 413 or not. There's a very good chance it might, but just to be safe, we'll wait and see. On Nvidia, we look bullish as well. On Nvidia, we formed a bullish wedge. We're starting to break out. So Nvidia looks bullish. If we're bullish, we want to see it try to break 550. If that breaks, we'll just keep making new all-time highs. If we fail to do so, we're going to be coming back down to 540. If that fails, 538 is coming or below that. We look bullish from a technical standpoint, but just to be safe, let's see what the data suggests. We'll be very patient with Nvidia, at least for now, and we'll see if we can get that bullish move. On Apple, we look bullish from a technical standpoint because it's very simple. We have a giant cup and handle like formation. You guys can see this cup and handle that was forming. If we're really bullish, we're going to be looking for a break of 188 plus to push to the 190s. If we're bearish, we want to see Apple fail right here, lose support, and come back down below 185. If that fails us, we're going to be sinking to the lower 180s. This cup and handle looks bullish, in my opinion. We're going to be looking for a nice breakout. Overall, the odds favor the upside. We're going to be watching to see how it ends up developing. So it all depends on CPI, but the chart does favor the upside, so we'll see what CPI brings. With that being said, I'm just going to be very quick with the rest of these tickers. If we get a hot CPI, 18.5 is coming for Rivian. If it's a low CPI and decent, we could be approaching 20. We'll be watching this very carefully. We look a little bearish from a technical standpoint on Rivian. Not looking the strongest, though. It's looking relatively weak, just like other EVs out there. So we'll have to wait and see. Very similar to that of Tesla, if anything. For SoFi, we're stuck in the middle between our key EMAs. I think it's going to test one of these EMAs depending on CPI. So basically, you can see it here that if we're bullish after CPI 8.8, excuse me, guys, 8.8 plus is coming for bullish. If we're bearish, 7.86 is coming. It all depends on CPI. That's going to be very key. For the IWM, we're between supply and demand. It's very simple. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 192 and sink towards, I would say, 189 to 190. If we're bullish, you want to see this break above 196.7 around there and push up towards 199. Right now, we're in the dead center for the IWM Russell 2000, so we'll just wait and see what CPI brings. It's very choppy, kind of indecisive right now, so just be a little bit patient. Microsoft looks bullish. If we're bullish, you want to see this thing just break out of this high and eventually approach our resistance at 184 and then, towards not 184, 384, then 390, guys. I'm sorry about that, guys. 390 is going to be our next target on Microsoft if we break out. If we're bearish, we're going to be breaking down to 376. If that fails us, 373 is coming. In my opinion, it looks bullish, however, so the odds do favor it approaching 390. So we will see if this ends up getting the support it needs. On AMD, we're going to be watching this 148 level. If we break above this, we keep pushing up. 151 is coming. If that breaks, 155 is our next target. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 145. It all depends on the data. CPI is going to have a big effect on this, so we'll wait and see. On Netflix, if we're bullish, you want to see this thing basically break above 491. 490 is going to be our target if we break out. If we're bearish, you want to see this thing basically lose 470. If that fails us, then 462 is next. We will see from here. If you're interested in SPX, Same thing as SPY, guys. We're going to be approaching our high from before and basically the all-time highs on it. If we're bullish after CPI, we get another push to the upside. If not, if we fail to do so, basically it's 4,800 plus. If we fail to do so, we could be retracing back down towards 4,750 if we get a rug pull, depending on CPI. So I'm just going to be unbiased. However, despite that, we look bullish on the weekly and the daily on SPX for now. So we'll be watching that as well. On the SQQQ, I'm going to go back to the daily time frame on this. This is still looking kind of weak, looking very bearish right now. If we're bearish, you want to see it come back down to 13. If we're bullish, you want to break 14.3. We're still in the middle, but it looks bearish from a technical standpoint. If the dollar is bullish, you want to see this thing break out above 103 and push up to 103.7. If we're bearish, you want to see this thing basically lose 102 and retrace back down towards this wick right here at 101.4. So I'm in the middle. We're very indecisive on the dollar, so we'll see how it goes. For Coinbase, if we're bullish, you want to see this thing basically break out towards 160 or like around 162. And for bearish, you want to see this thing basically lose 143. We're kind of in the middle, so we'll see how it goes from here. We're on a downtrend, so we are looking a little weak on the daily. But in my opinion, the biggest factor is going to be not just CPI, but also the Bitcoin ETF news. So we'll see if any news comes out. It is trying to push into after hours. We're currently around like 160. But just to be safe, we will see if this thing starts launching even higher. Now, without CPI, if we're just going to talk about a massive move depending on the Bitcoin news, the Bitcoin ETF news, if we get a big breakout, 174 is going to likely come if we get a much bigger move because of the Bitcoin news. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. But I'm still waiting for that. I'm not 100% convicted yet. We'll wait and see if any new developments come from the SEC's regulations. If we lose, if we end up not getting what we want, and our next support is going to be 135. If we lose that, we turn bearish. But I would favor 173 if we get some bullish news. We're just waiting over the weekend, over the next few days or so. And then CPI, if we just ignore any pieces of news and just look at CPI, then we're going to make the smaller move I called out earlier. For Google, they're going to be approaching 145 if that breaks. We could get very close to 150 off a bullish move. We look somewhat bullish now. If we're bearish, we want to see it lose 141.5 and retrace to 140. This all depends on CPI. Amazon looks bullish. We're approaching 155 if that breaks. If CPI launches Amazon higher and it keeps pushing, it looks bullish right now. 160 is going to be our target for the end of the week, if not by next week. For bearish, you want to see it basically retest 149. If that fails us, 145 is coming. So do we launch and get close to 160 or do we end up coming back down to 145? That will depend on CPI. For Meta, if we're bullish, you want to see this thing basically approach this resistance right here. I'm going to have to go all the way back for this. It's basically very close to 380. So I'm not going to go all the way back, guys. 380 is going to be our target on Meta if we keep pushing. If we're bearish, you want to see this thing basically lose 370 flat and come down towards 359. If we're bearish, 359 is coming. If we're bullish, you want to see it break to 380. It all depends on CPI and these other factors involving tech. So that being said, guys, SPY, the QQQ, Nvda, and Aapl, they all look bullish from a technical standpoint. They do favor the upside. CPI is likely going to be decent, but just to be safe, I can't promise that. I said it's likely going to be that. I can't say that with 100% certainty. So we'll wait and see what the data looks like. As far as Tesla goes, it looks relatively weak right now. Technicals do not look very strong on Tesla. It's selling off more, and it does favor the downside. Make sure you watch the supports I called out at 230, 232, 230, and then 228. But just to be safe, I'm not going to promise anything. We will see what CPI brings. So be patient, guys. We'll see what CPI gives us, and I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow morning to report what CPI tells us. With that being said, have a great day. Remain calm, cool, and collected, and I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Tesla the market to the moon because the long term is very bright, and peace out.